Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and petrol heads all around the world, welcome to episode 7 of F1 Radio. F1 Radio is your dedicated source of anything and everything you need to know in the world of Formula 1. We bring you all the latest paddock gossip and racing rumours, as well as reviewing Grand Prix events and answering your questions in the listeners' Q&A segment. Come rain or shine, F1 Radio is your dedicated Formula 1 podcast, airing on every Grand Prix week on podcast services across the internet for your amusement. If you like what you hear, follow us on Twitter @_F1 Radio to let us know what you think of the show, and also to send us your F1 related questions that, if you're lucky enough, we will answer in a future episode. I'm your host, Tom Fenton, and as always, joining me today is the editor-in-chief of ReadMotorsport.com and Autosport Junior, Josh Attil.
Yes, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are listening in the world. And what a week of motorsport it's been, and penultimate race, of course, of the Formula 1 season. So wow, it doesn't seem too long ago since we're in Australia, but now just one more race to go.
If you didn't already know, every F1 Radio episode is split into 3 juicy segments to ensure every wheel nut is tightened correctly before the episode leaves the pit box and into your various devices. Let's start off with what is and forever will be the Weekly Watch. In today's episode, we have 3 news items to discuss in the world of Formula 1. So Josh, let's begin with news item 1, and this relates to the Brazilian Grand Prix' future. Now, I think everybody's been aware of some recent news, not only this Grand Prix, but throughout pretty much every Brazilian Grand Prix that has been hosted for at least the last 5 years that I can remember, where there's been criminal activity that has occurred and it's affected people and teams, and in this year a Mercedes minibus was robbed of its laptops and all the gear and equipment that was in there, and I also believe they were robbed at gunpoint and somebody had a gun to their head. So this is really dramatic. I mean, we all know that the favelas in Brazil aren't the most calm or most safe place to be, maybe, but when you think Formula 1 is a road show that is probably the most expensive roadshow in the world, and the amount of technology in there and security that should be in place to stop this happening, but yet it happens every year, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, also on top of that kind of Mercedes robbery, the Pirelli guys got robbed as well. Obviously, Williams were caught up in the Mercedes thing, and Sauber as well, personnel were subject to attacks as well this weekend. So, really, really not very good. And, safety, of course, has to be paramount. We talk about it all the time on the track, but of course, this is a bit of off the track, and I think really, it's got to go really it's off the calendar for a few years maybe, and then they can tighten up the security.
Now, this issue with crime is actually a very small part of the Brazilian Grand Prix' future and them sort of permutations, because it's not just about the crime, because we've had the Brazilian Grand Prix on the F1 calendar for many years, and it's always been an issue. Brazil is a place that is going to take a long time to change, and unless they move the circuit elsewhere, or shall I say use a different circuit, which I don't know if they have many other circuits, but I think most people would want Interlagos. That's the circuit they'd want. But also there's the financial side, and the promoter of the circuit, I believe, is actually Bernie Ecclestone, and obviously we all know how easy he is to work with and how good sometimes he is at making very poor decisions or making ridiculous ideas come true, and he doesn't sound confident when I listen to an interview about him about the circuit's future. Many people believe in that the Grand Prix we just had on the weekend will be the last Brazilian Grand Prix. Also, the circuit is actually owned by the state, and the mayor of Sao Paulo is considering selling the track to help. He says it is going to help security, but I don't understand how that could help security. But yeah, all these issues have resulted in the tyre test that was meant to occur during the first few days of this week after the Grand Prix. That had to be cancelled, and basically we're left with a situation, Josh, where maybe Massa retiring, he being the last Brazilian on the grid, also bring an end to the Brazilian Grand Prix, which I think for all the fans out there, including myself, would be a disaster.
Yeah, and really, looking down the kind of junior single seater ranks, I really can't see another kind of really talented Brazilian that I think is kind of destined to get to Formula One. You've got a few guys like Sergio Seta Camara who, possibly maybe could get to F1, but we'll need a bit of backing, we'll need a bit of support, and really that looks a bit flaky with Brazil right now. We saw that with Felipe, where really his kind of sponsorship, kind of got him into Formula One, but it couldn't really keep him there, and that kind of was pulled from underneath him, and that kind of left him without a seat. So it's weird because we've gone from a situation, I think, kind of back in 2010 when we had, Degrassi, we had Bruno Senna, we had Felipe Massa, we had a real kind of thriving Brazilian core. We had Barrichello, of course, as well, the main one arguably there. And now we've been, as you said, reduced down to 0 Brazilian drivers on the grid next year. And as I mentioned, none that really above karting I could see that are kind of, Norris, Leclerc, Russell kind of level, where they're kind of destined to get to Formula One. So it is in a bit of a dire situation, and like you say, there's got to be a link between the kind of drivers and the attendants. You've got to have those homegrown talents for the Brazilians to cheer on.
Definitely in Brazil, they're almost like British people in some ways, that they like to support their own nationality, which is fair enough. But we saw obviously not only the events that happened after the Grand Prix, where Massa was on the podium, but also last year where the whole crowd are there for him, really. And I think obviously the ticket sales would suffer next year with him not being there, and maybe that's why they're considering this. But we just don't want to see a great circuit, a classic circuit like Interlagos, leave the calendar and be replaced by something maybe not so good. And Brazil always usually produces a very interesting and exciting race, and we don't have many of them on the calendar. It's mainly because obviously it does have quite a lot of rain often, and the conditions can be variable, but the circuit is an amazing circuit.
Very unforgiving as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's very unforgiving, and there's been so many classic moments that have happened at the circuit, and I think it would be wrong for them to get rid of it. But either way, this is something that I guess we'll be able to update you guys later, probably next year, about this. But the next news item, Josh, is one of our favourite topics, and that is engines. So tell the listeners what this is all about.
Yeah, well, of course, last episode we talked about the kind of newly announced engine regulations, and now we've kind of got, a bit more kind of accustomed to them now. We've kind of been able to look over them a bit more. But obviously one of the key factors which, was not announced before the last episode was announced, a very long time ago. It's been the plan for a while. Was the fact that we're going to have the teams are going to be limited, or each driver is going to be limited to 3 engines next season. That's the last 20 run races. That's 7 Grand Prix weekends per engine. And surely, Tom, as you've written in the notes, it is too far.
Yeah, I think we all know gone are the days where manufacturers were able to just blow up engines at the end of the Grand Prix because they didn't need them anymore. So we know we're trying to be more environmentally friendly, and I think the engines that we currently have in F1, especially the 2017 specification, I think overall, maybe apart from some issues Renault and Honda have had, overall they've been pretty good, and I think that would be a good base to build on for next engine regulations in 2021. I think 7 Grand Prix weekends, and it's not just the race. That's what people must remember. It's practice, it's qualifying, it's all anything when they're on the track. They're going to have to be using an engine that is part of this 3-unit specification. So 3 units is not going to last for 21 races for maybe even Mercedes as well. And could we see teams, maybe bringing in fresher engines at certain tracks to have a huge advantage in power? Because, maybe some manufacturers are going to play it more safely, and maybe they don't want to incur a penalty. So that could be interesting in that way, but it's too far. I think also some of the elements inside of the power units are actually restricted to 2 allocations. So an example is the MG UK. So they've got to use the MG UK for over 10 races each one. And this is ridiculous, Josh. I don't understand who thought this was the right way to go. I thought 2017 was a pretty good balance in terms of reliability and I guess trying to pressurize the engine, not too much, but making it more of a concern in terms of reliability.
well, Mercedes made it to the end of the season without, or they got one more race, and without incurring a single grid penalty, for engine parts on any of their cars or the customers' cars. So not a single engine failure, I believe, all year as well, or at least one that really mattered for Mercedes, Williams, and Force India. So clearly, I mean, they're doing it right. Ferrari are pretty much fine as well. Of course, there are a few problems. But obviously it's Renault and Honda really that this is really, really going to hurt even more. Mercedes will probably manage to do it, probably fine next year. But Renault and Honda are really, really going to struggle, and it's really going to ruin, I think, a bit of the fight. We saw that, we'll talk about it more in the race report, but, this weekend, obviously, all those teams that were running the Renault engines weren't really a factor this weekend because we were having to run on kind of conservative, engine modes to kind of help with reliability. And really it's just going to, make a lot more retirements. Red Bull probably aren't going to be a factor, or McLaren in the championship fight next year, just because they're going to have so many grid penalties. But a championship charge will not be realistic because they're going to be starting at the back in a quarter of the races.
Yeah, that's a very good point to mention. Obviously, making it more difficult for the engine manufacturers is good for the environment, and it's good to, I guess, make them produce better engines. But obviously, it's going to affect the competition on the track, and I just don't understand why maybe they haven't just left the current specifications that we have for the engines, so 4 or 5 engines a year, and the current allocations that we have for all the parts within the engines just alone until 2021, because it's not many seasons away now. 2021 is 3 seasons away, so why do they need to mess around when they know a big deal is going to happen in 2021, and that's going to probably shake things up even further? So I just think they should wait, but who knows? I guess F1 always makes really poor decisions, and we'll see, I guess. But the final news item in today's weekly watch is the 2018 driver lineup. So another topic that we like to talk about on F1 Radio. It's basically a short update, Josh. We've pretty much been confirmed that Gasly and Hartley are going to be partnering up for Toro Rosso, so they will take them seats, which leaves 3 seats open, and one of them is a Williams, and the other 2 are Saubers. So the Williams, we know, is obviously related to most likely Kubica getting that drive, or Di Resta, and he actually has another test with Williams, a 3rd test in the Abu Dhabi, I think it's the Young Drivers Test, where even though he's not a young
Used
driver,
to be, yes, but now all the teams
they just call it a general test.
A driver test, basically.
And the other 2 seats are the Saubers, which we are also pretty confident that one of them's going to Ericsson, and almost definitely the other one will be going to the young Ferrari protégé Leclerc. So yeah, I don't think there's really much more to say on that, Josh. But what are your thoughts on the choices? For example, Toro Rosso, choosing Gasly and Hartley. I think obviously Gasly's a good choice, but I don't know about Hartley myself.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult, isn't it? They don't really have any other options. Like you say, it's pretty much they haven't confirmed Hartley and Gasly, but I mean really, who else are going to stick in that car? I think what's going to be crucial next year is obviously both of them will have a proper shot, and they've got Honda engine though, so we'll have to see if. Because of course at the moment, the races they've had so far and the weekends they've had so far, it's been so tough to judge them because they've just had so many problems. So I'd say the jury's out on both of them. I think both of them still need to do a lot more to impress, but the team seem to be, very happy with them on what they've done so far. But I think away from F1, we'll have to see who Red Bull sign in terms of their young drivers. They're probably going to kind of clear the decks or kind of really push the drivers they've got now, because then they'll be wanting to put probably new drivers into Toro Rosso for 2020. We'll have to see how it goes for Gasly and Hartley. I think especially for Hartley, just because of course he's a little bit older. Gasly could definitely have a long future, but for Hartley, I think is more of a stopgap really in terms of I don't think he's a contender for a Red Bull seat at all. Gasly possibly. So yeah, we'll have to see who they bring in for 2020 and who they bring onto the books next year. That probably gives us a good idea. Sauber, I think definitely Leclerc will be there. Second seat is between Ericsson and Giovinazzi. Probably leaning more towards Ericsson at the moment, but don't count out Giovinazzi just yet. Although I think it'd be a little pointless for Sauber on their side to have 2 Ferrari juniors, at least commercially. I don't think they're going to want to have that, unfortunately. So probably Ericsson and Leclerc there. And Williams, yeah, looking like Robert Kubica at the moment. I can't really see. Yeah, I think it has to be Kubica really at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. I think obviously the man that's, I guess, left with no job anymore is going to be Pascal Wehrlein, and obviously he's probably already knows that there's not really a great chance anywhere. So, if you're in his shoes, are you going to maybe go to something like DTM or the World Endurance Championship, or do you play maybe like take a gap year or whatever and see what happens in 2019? What would you do, Josh?
I mean, it's still obviously
difficult.
Yeah, I mean, what it is, Williams obviously for this Abu Dhabi test have 2 days of running, right? And one of the days they're running Kubica, and I don't believe they've announced who's running on the other day. Of course, it could just be Lance Stroll, or it could possibly even be Pascal Wehrlein. We'd have to see on that one because, of course, he'd have, if Sauber don't have a seat from him, then I think they'd probably let him go. The relationship seems pretty good between Wehrlein and Sauber. They clearly, I think, want to remain together, but of course, unfortunately, financial restraints mean they probably can't for next year. So we could possibly still see Wehrlein. That's kind of a bit of an outside bet, or even Danny Kvyat in that second day for Williams, or maybe it'll just be Paul di Resta or Lance Stroll. We'll have to see. So if you can't get a shot in F1 next year, I'd probably take a reserve role somewhere. Possibly maybe even with Williams, or somewhere like that, or maybe even Sauber, but maybe a little unlikely, and then go and race in DTM. Final year for Mercedes, they can bring back one of their former DTM champions, of course, Paul di Resta. I think that'd be pretty cool. It's Mercedes pulling out of DTM at the end of 2018, and then they're going into Formula E the year after. So, I think you guys can make the link there.
And with that slightly awkward silence, it's time for Racing Report.
Today's Racing Report is, of course, the 2017 Brazilian Grand Prix, the penultimate round of the Formula 1 season, and pole position went to Valtteri Bottas, of course, just edging out Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Räikkönen. Of course, Lewis Hamilton was not in this picture because he had that dramatic spin in Q1 into the barriers, and very, very strange one there for Hamilton. Looked like driver error. He would start from the pit lane, and also Daniel Ricciardo as well, starting towards back in 14th. Due to, of course, engine penalties with Renault. Then, of course, in the race, Hamilton made a brilliant recovery up to 4th place, but couldn't quite nick that final podium place, which went to Kimi Räikkönen. And meanwhile, up at the front, Sebastian Vettel squeezed past Valtteri Bottas into turn 1 and held the lead to the end. So that's his first win since Hungary, which is pretty incredible to say. Valtteri Bottas then 2nd, Räikkönen and Hamilton 3rd and 4th, as I mentioned. Then 2 Red Bulls, Verstappen and Ricciardo. Of course, Ricciardo coming from the back and coming from a bit of first lap contact as well, so good performance from him. Felipe Massa in his final Brazilian Grand Prix, what a great result for him. Best of the rest in 7th, holding off Fernando Alonso right at the death, and also Sergio Perez as well in 9th. Finished, I think, just 2 tenths behind Alonso over the line. It was very, very close. Then came the 2 Renaults in 10th and 11th for Hulkenberg and Sainz, maybe a bit of a disappointing weekend for them. Then came the Renault-powered Toro Rosso of Pierre Gasly in 12th, his best result in Formula 1. He called it his best race. Marcus Ericsson beat Pascal Wehrlein right at the end. Wehrlein managed to do 70 laps on the soft tyres. Unorthodox strategy, let's say, from Sauber on that one. Grosjean was 15th, Stroll 16th, and 4 retirements for today were Hartley, Ocon, Van Dorn, and Magnussen. The kind of latter 3 of those were all involved in a big first lap tangle, and I think that's where we got to start, Tom, I think, with this pretty hectic first lap.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously Hamilton was nowhere in the picture due to, like you said, that very strange incident in Q1. So obviously down into turn 1, Bottas was on pole. He had to try and, I guess assert himself as a real contender for next year's title. And obviously he has a target of trying to outscore Vettel in the championship, which probably was possible if he would have won today or in the Brazilian Grand Prix. So into turn 1, Vettel, he did have the inside line and broke a little later, and I think obviously Bottas is showing that maybe he's a little bit too cautious about things, but either way, Vettel got into the lead, and then in the middle of the pack, like you said, obviously we had Hamilton in the pit lane, so he's out of the picture, but Ricciardo at the back of the grid almost, and he was trying to make up positions, and he got himself into a tangle with Van Dorn and who was the other guy? I can't remember. Kevin Magnussen. So that was on the exit of the CNRS, and basically at the time it looked like maybe he just dropped it, but it turned out that he did in fact have contact. It was just 3 into 2 doesn't go, obviously, and that set him back a lot. But luckily for him and for Hamilton, there was a further incident that escalated, and that was with Ocon, who, unfortunately for him, he has ended his 27 straight finishing streak, and he had collided with, I believe, Grosjean, and that resulted in him finally having a retirement in the 2017 season, and that, including with the first lap or first few corners incidents, resulted in a safety car, which, as I was mentioning before, has helped Hamilton and Ricciardo greatly. In obviously, if Ricciardo needed to make a pit stop, I don't believe he did, or did he?
Yeah, I think he did, but because they all drove through the pits, didn't they? So they only lost like three whatever seconds because they couldn't go on the main straight. Hamilton was, I think, up to 14 after the safety car restart, so that certainly helped him.
So either way, it helped the two back markers who we were going, I think regardless of a safety car, they would have probably still finished in the positions they did finish in, but it helped them a lot. And then after that, really, the race was quite steady, I think, Josh. I can't remember too many big incidents apart from, obviously, probably the main talking points throughout the race, at least before the Massa, Alonso and Perez fight, was Hamilton and Ricciardo. So how would you rate both of their performances? Obviously, Hamilton starting in the pit lane and Ricciardo somewhere at the back of the grid.
Yeah, I mean, of course, this was a race I think Hamilton really, really should have won. Right from kind of Friday practice, he was right on it, and the Mercedes car looked pretty dominant really this weekend. And I think this was a big, big steal for Ferrari. And just how different this picture would have been. Had I hate to use what ifs, but had kind of Singapore, Malaysia, Japan not happened for Vettel, because if you think about it, these past two races, a controversial clash between Hamilton and Vettel, which would have got a whole lot more controversial without the kind of easing to the championship of Hamilton, and then this race as well, where Vettel steals it and Hamilton crashes in qualifying. Would have that crash in qualifying happened if Hamilton would have still kind of still have the championship to fight for? Also, I mean, Hamilton hasn't won a race since being crowned champion. The same thing happened in 2015 as well, so a bit of a weird one there, maybe losing a little bit of focus, but then to counter that, his drive on Sunday was really, really good. A great recovery drive to finish just 5.4 seconds off Vettel in the end. That's pretty frightening from the pit lane. So yeah, a stellar drive, but ultimately that little crash, that little moment, which I don't think we can put too harshly onto him. At the end of the day, cost him 13 points and cost him the race win.
Yeah, exactly. I think you highlight a great point that Hamilton does seem to have a tendency when the championship's wrapped up that maybe he just is a little bit more relaxed, and obviously, like you said, I remember seeing the incident and I initially didn't put it down to driver error. It looked very strange. So either way, like you said, I don't think he's ever won a race after having the championship crowned in that season, obviously. So it's strange. Maybe he will put it right if he wins another championship, or he can put it right in Abu Dhabi.
In Abu Dhabi, yes, very possible.
Either way, like you said, a great comeback for him, and obviously he had all the gizmos of a new engine, which helped. But I don't know if that would really comfort somebody like Bottas, who was in the same equipment really, and he was only a couple of seconds behind him. But I think the other guy who did very well coming back through the pack was Ricciardo, and I cannot believe how ballsy this guy is and how ridiculous his overtakes are. I genuinely I can't process what the other drivers are doing. I don't understand, and it's exciting to watch him race because he just comes back from positions and he overtakes these people from unachievable positions, in my opinion, and it's great to see. I think Ricciardo clearly is probably the best overtaker in F1. He seems to be very good on the brakes, which helps him a lot. And I mean, a lot of people into turn one who he was overtaken didn't really fight him, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a bit of a snowball effect. Ricciardo has now built up that reputation having these, last of the late breakers. So when he's behind you, you kind of almost anticipate that he's going to dive it down the inside and you're not going to fight it. I think, this race obviously had, I think if you probably totaled up the number of overtakes, probably a fair amount of overtakes, courtesy mainly of Ricciardo and Hamilton. But really, I feel like the race was just a little flat, really, in terms of it seemed to be kind of similar moves into turn one. And really, I just wasn't that invested or excited in Hamilton and Ricciardo coming through the field. Taking nothing away from their individual performances because, as you mentioned, they were great. And really, fourth and sixth, you couldn't have really asked for much more from them. Certainly not with Ricciardo and, probably not with Hamilton either with, the dirty air. And that's the thing, really, that kind of ruined this race for me, the two things. Obviously, dirty air and not being able to follow as closely kind of robbed us of, I think, a mega fight for the win. And also, just the engine deficits really were just kind of painful. Moves were done before the braking zone, over the start-finish straight. So, yeah, those two things I think made this a pretty mediocre Brazilian Grand Prix, which is a shame because we know that when the cars are good, the track is magnificent. We saw it last year. What a great race we had there. And we have had good dry Brazilian Grand Prix as well. They're not only good if it's wet. So I think just highlight the problem with the current cars.
I think it's been a problem throughout the season as well as with the tyres as well. Obviously, it's a one-stop race. There's not really much you can do to try and outsmart the other teams. And I think also, like you mentioned, Ricciardo and Hamilton drove very well, but like the top three cars are so far ahead of anybody else that it's not really a surprise that they can come through the field like that. Even though it is a good job, they should be doing it in them sort of cars. And like you said, with the engines that especially Hamilton has, he was past people quite easily. And I don't think anybody really made a big deal about it, apart from maybe Perez, somebody like that. But it was very easy for Hamilton to get to fourth place. And maybe if the race went a different way, maybe he could have won it. But either way, I think Bottas, as I mentioned before, are we seeing this poor pace again? I've read that Toto Wolff says that he doesn't have this killer instinct or whatever to get the job done sometimes. And, to be only 2 seconds ahead of your teammate who started in the pit lane, albeit with a safety car, and maybe Hamilton has a slightly more powerful engine because it's newer, is very embarrassing, I would say, over 71 laps.
Yeah, for sure. It's really not good for Bottas. But, I mean, to be fair, with the kind of gap to Hamilton, he couldn't really go much further without overtaking Vettel, and we saw that was pretty much impossible for Mercedes to overtake Ferrari due to the dirty air. And, they tried to do it on the pit stops, but of course Ferrari, just covered them off, which was the right thing to do. Got track position, and the job was done. But, undoubtedly, I think disappointing from Bottas, you kind of mentioned earlier, he needs to show a bit more grit on the first lap. He could have probably covered off Vettel, but at the same time, it's probably gotten him into trouble before.
Yeah. So I think looking further down the grid, we will end with Massa. I think that's the right thing to do. But we must talk about, I guess it relates to Renault, or Red Bull, but just Renault overall. We've heard reports that maybe they had to have certain parts of their engines turned down because of fears of overheating and basically failures to the motors and the electrical units. So do you think this really hindered Renault? Because not just the works team, but Red Bull couldn't really threaten anybody, and they were close, but just imagine what maybe they would have been capable of if they could have ran the engine at full power.
Yeah, it really did ruin their race. It ruined Renault's race and probably ruined Toro Rosso's race as well, really. Of course, it's better than them kind of blowing up and that and being out of the race, but at the same time, is it really? Because they just weren't a factor at all. I'd almost kind of rather them just completely go at it and kind of win or bin mentality. But I think because they face so much criticism, it's really not good for Renault's image. Them having blow-ups all the time and that, and not good for for Red Bull and Renault's relationship. That's turned pretty sour, as we saw over the weekend and with Toro Rosso as well. That was all very, very messy. But yeah, it kind of robbed us of Max Verstappen as well. One of the tracks really showed such class at last year. Finishing 32 seconds was a bit of a crime, really. I know he had that kind of extra pit stop, but even so, he really should have been a factor for the win, because he's been the factor for the win in the last few races. But like I say, we were robbed of that, unfortunately. We will not be robbed of that, though, in Abu Dhabi, because fortunately Abu Dhabi is a lot closer to the sea. That was the problem with Brazil. It's too high up, so they had to restrict the engines. But with it being very low in terms of sea level in Abu Dhabi, that will not be a problem. And even with those long straights, just maybe Max Verstappen, Daniel Ricciardo will both be in the fight.
I think the final word with the Brazilian Grand Prix for the 2017 season has to lie with Massa. And firstly, not only did he achieve 7th place, which is a great drive for, maybe the car wasn't really capable of that, I don't know, but how he defended and how he shows his maturity, he shows why he is a very great driver, and he was able to keep the likes of Alonso and Perez, who are two highly rated drivers, behind him when he was clearly very slow. Obviously, Alonso has an engine that maybe can't overtake Massa down the straights, but Perez definitely does have an engine that can. So I think, what are your thoughts on his drive overall throughout the Brazilian Grand Prix, and especially those last closing laps?
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame he can't drive like this all the time, right? Otherwise, he might have won a world championship. Yeah, but yeah, a great drive. Couldn't have done much more. Really good defending. I mean, of course, it was Alonso behind him with his engine and that, but even so, just to kind of withstand that pressure, and even possibly, I think this might be his kind of first best of the rest result in a very long time. I think so. Really, really good job from him. Possibly, I think since Bahrain, that might have been the last time he was kind of best of the rest behind the top 3 teams. So very well deserved, and he's ahead of Lance Stroll in the Drivers' Championship, because I think it'd have been a crime for him to finish the season behind, really, when he's completely obliterated him. I mean, what was Stroll doing this weekend, to be honest? Why did he even turn up?
Yeah, finishing 16th.
Not very good. I can't remember a driver who's been so kind of up and down, really, where one weekend they'll have this magnificent result, like last time out in Mexico, just come out of nowhere and get a 6th place. We'll get that podium of Baku. And then this weekend just be so far off the pace, lock up, ruin 2 sets of tyres, and finish 16th, wow.
Yeah, I think obviously you make a good point. Maybe if he drove like this a bit more often, maybe we wouldn't be having a conversation about, who replaces him, because he probably would have had the job. But I think, we had great scenes last year with Massa when he unfortunately retired from the race, and the whole pit crew and basically the whole pit lane were just applauding him and the crowd. But we also had another situation where after the podium ceremony, Massa and I think a few of his kids, and I think they had Barrichello up there as well, were able to talk to the crowd, and basically Massa was able to thank everybody for the support and the caring they've shown over his basically his entire career, especially since he joined Ferrari in 2006. I think this is sort of stuff that we need to see in F1 more often. Do you not think so?
Yeah, this is a good thing about Liberty Media, really, and the way they've done this. A small thing, they should have got the top 3 off the podium before they brought out Massa, really, because they're kind of standing around it a little awkwardly. There's little things I think they can improve on. Obviously, last time out in Mexico, we talked about the revolving podium. It was a bit ridiculous, but, it's nice for them to really, try out these different things and really mark what's been a fantastic career for Felipe. He's one of the nicest guys in Formula One, that's for sure. And on top of that as well, a very, very solid driver who's had a great career, won multiple races, pole positions, and all that good stuff. And a good way for him for the sport to kind of pay a little back to Massa. And this has just set a nice precedent for the future. And hopefully next year, when Kimi Räikkönen will also have his farewell, hopefully in Abu Dhabi next year.
So, Josh, we have just one more question about the Brazilian Grand Prix that I require you to ask, and that is, 2 actually, but you could say that they're one question combined, because I'm requiring you to give me two numbers, and the first number is, how do you rate the overall Grand Prix? So how much, out of 10, what did you rate the 2017 Brazilian Grand Prix? And then the final one is, who's your driver of the day? So actually, that's not a number.
I'll give a car number, yes.
Exactly, so yeah.
Alright, we'll start off with race rating. I'm going to have a 5 out of 10, I'm sorry. I know some people very much enjoyed it, but as I mentioned, I really did not enjoy it. But even so, still some good moments, obviously, for Felipe as well, and decent fight for the win, at least in turn 1. Driver of the day, wow. Vettel did a great job, obviously, to win. Hamilton did a good job. If we're talking about driver of the day, that technically only means Sunday. So he was very, very good on Sunday. Massa was very good. Okay, here we go. I'm giving it to Massa. Right, yeah, we're giving it to Massa. Massa, 5 out of 10.
Okay.
Well, that's fine. I'm giving it to Massa.
No, that's fine. I will happily give it to Massa. I'm not really bothered who. I think the only other person I'd really consider would probably be Ricciardo, but that's just because I cannot believe how good he is at overtaking.
That's very true, yeah. I completely overlooked that.
That makes sense.
We'll give him Hamilton, Vettel, Ricciardo, Massa. Well done. All to all.
Well, that's what we thought about the Brazilian Grand Prix in the 2017 season of Formula 1. But what did you guys think? So why don't you tweet us at _F1 Radio to let us know what you thought about the Grand Prix, the race, and also why don't you tell us what you think about the whole season and Abu Dhabi, the final race of the season. So Josh, we're almost at the checkered flag of this episode, but before we cross the line, what is it time for?
Well, it is time for the final segment of the show where you guys, the F1 radio community, get to have your say, really, as we answer one of your questions from the community. It's time for the questionable queries.
What the hell is happening in an exit on 12? I have no power if I don't push the K1. Do we really think that the tires will last in the end of the race? Because it doesn't feel like it. Do you really want that I keep going? Because it's just absolute.
So, Tom, what's today's topic of the conversation, and who asked the question?
Well, this is from my boy, Sam Orr. He is a friend of mine who tweets me a lot about F1. In fact, it's Facebook Messenger, I must not lie. He does message me a lot about Formula 1 news and sends me many Reddit threads that I do not read. But either way, he is asking me questions about the tyres situation. Now, I was only aware of this thanks to you, Josh, telling me that they've probably going to introduce a new compound for next season. So I'm not 100% sure, but it's a soft compound and they're asking people to vote on the name. So it's either going to be a mega soft or a hyper soft or
extreme soft.
I'm sorry, like we've already got ultra, super and soft. Why do we need another one? This is ridiculous. This is what my friend is saying. Sam is saying that why are the tyres, what Pirelli is doing, why are they being so ridiculous?
Yes, but I don't know, to be honest. They seem to think that's the way to fix it. Pirelli have, one job for next year, and that is not bringing in a new compound. That is changing all of the compounds and, fixing what have been, I think, pretty poor tyres this year. They've done the job of not blowing up, safety-wise, and that's literally it, in terms of performance. They brought good performance. I mean, honestly, I don't blame Pirelli, and I never have, because they've literally just done what F1 wanted them to do, which was make tyres that pretty much last the whole race. So hopefully next year we'll get proper degradation, we'll get proper kind of falling off the cliff. I'm talking, not 2013 levels, but kind of 2011, 2012 levels was pretty sensible. It, really kind of promoted a lot of overtaking, a lot of split strategies, and really just brought that strategical element, which I think has been lacking really this year, back into the focus. And, of course, the main focus shouldn't be completely on the tyres, but I think it has to play an important role, and that's what they should be focusing on. But instead, as Tom mentioned, they're bringing in this new, softer compound, which,
So will this now be the softest?
Yes, this will be the softest. So we'll have, say, I think a mega soft, or hyper soft, I think, is the one that's winning. I'm not quite sure which one. And then you'll have ultra, super, soft, medium, hard. So for me, the solution is to have, you can kind of use these range of compounds if you want, but literally to each weekend, you bring 3 of them and you name them the soft, the medium, and the hard. So that they could kind of interchange each weekend, but they're going to have the same marking on them for every weekend for the soft, the medium, and the hard. So just 3 different tyres basically for every weekend. But Pirelli themselves have a range to choose from to offer up to the teams.
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to follow what you're saying, and it sounds very complicated. Why I don't understand why they need to have so many tyres. And Sam, we're going to say that it's ridiculous. Sam also has 2 more questions that are more generic, but we'll definitely answer them. Do we need more teams in Formula 1?
Yes. Undoubtedly.
How many do you reckon?
I think the best number would be 12 healthy teams, and unpopular belief that I think there should be 1-car teams allowed and part-time teams allowed.
What about 3-car teams?
No. No. I don't know, because 1-car teams helps the smaller teams, 3-car teams helps the bigger teams. And everyone knows that I'm the big small teams flag waver. So I think either 12 or 13 teams would be good. 26 absolute maximum, because that's the Monaco limit, and we'd have to have pre-qualifying, and I don't think that would work in modern Formula 1.
Yeah.
As great as it would be, I don't think that would happen. So, yeah.
And finally, Sam suggests, should there be a budget cap?
Yes. Again, waving my small team flag. There should be a budget cap. Will there be a budget cap is probably the main question. And that's, I don't know, because it's probably going to get blocked again. It looks a lot more realistic. I think they're looking about 200 million. They were looking, I think, about 40 million back in 2009. And that's why that one completely failed. So this one looks a little bit more realistic. And if so, that would be a great, because it would level out the playing field quite a lot. It would help everyone, really, apart from Mercedes and Ferrari. It would even help Red Bull, really, for them, because, I think they could beat everyone on equal terms, and that's exactly what they want. So, yes, more teams and a budget cap, please.
I only have one comment to say about the budget cap. Is that my understanding of economics and finance isn't great, but companies are very good at hiding money. Almost as if it's impossible to trace. So I just think that the big companies like Ferrari and Mercedes will still be able to spend more. How do you implement it?
That's a very good question for Ross Brawn. I mean, I'd hope that if one was introduced, they could regulate it. They can regulate other stuff, so I'd be fairly confident that they could do it. But I know it's very difficult. But they've got to try something, right? Because the current way it's going, it's not going to last in its current form. And the more the struggle that goes on, the more even I warm to 3-car teams, and I was set against it. But even I am kind of considering in my mind. But no, I'm still firmly against that.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Sam, for giving us your questions. Our answers are: yep, the ties are ridiculous. Yes, we'd like some more teams, maybe just a couple more. And yeah, I think we'd like a budget cap. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and petrol heads all around the world, we've reached the end of this race. I thank Josh for co-hosting the show with me today, and I thank you, the listeners. It's people like you and I that keep the racing spirit alive in the crazy world of Formula One, so we cannot thank you enough for supporting the show. Please like, subscribe, rate, review, and share this episode across the various platforms that host F1 Radio, including iTunes, YouTube, and TuneIn, if you like what you hear. Until next time, it's been a pleasure to serve.